All right, so welcome again to the Zoom room. Really nice to see you back here. Sue, Sally, welcome again. So Sally, you were doing a little share of an insight. If you don't mind sharing that, I think our listeners would appreciate it.
I was just smiling about an insight last night that people dowse and use EAM to sway on and various tools to ask their higher self or Holy Spirit, should they do this or that? And then it just suddenly dawned on me, you're asking the Holy Spirit that doesn't believe in illusions, which illusion shall I choose, this illusion or that illusion? And then I got the giggles. I just found that really humorous. Which is my best illusion.
Yeah, which is the best illusion? It is kind of spiritual comedy, really. So yeah, maybe you just rephrase the question. If you need guidance, you just say, well, I don't know, just show me. And you can get specific guidance, but without any emphasis on the form. I think that's really the differentiating feature between the ego and the spirit, or one of the big ones. The ego emphasizes form, and the form is very important, and you've got to get the choice right, because that choice could be a disaster, and that choice could be amazing. And the Holy Spirit doesn't emphasize the form outcome. It's more about just a feeling, and that choice is going to advance you on the spiritual path. So that might mean that on the level of form, that choice, you let go of all kinds of things on the level of form. And people would go, well, that's not very good, but it's a choice designed to take you back home, to your true spiritual home. So you can't really judge it in terms of our the normal criteria of the ego, which if we get there today, section 10 of the Manual for Teachers is all about judgment. How do you relinquish judgment? Which is a key question, really, for the teacher of God. How do you actually let it all go?
So when the COVID vaccine thing came out, I did sway on that to see if it was for my highest good to have it or not. But I didn't really need to sway on it, because the feeling was so strong. It was a no. It was just absolute no. There was no debate on it at all. So I don't know. I was just pondering, what you can sway on or what you can douse on. Because if we're just saying it's got to feel right, do you feel peaceful? Yes, that's the right direction to be going in. If there's resistance to making a certain choice, then it's helpful to do the work on the resistance before you ask that question, isn't it? Yeah. Because otherwise you can't even get a clear answer, can you?
Comes down to the same thing, forgiveness or letting go. And you let go of the block to the awareness of love's presence, and allow yourself to enter that presence. And then in that presence, maybe the answer arises. Maybe it doesn't arise straight away. Maybe it comes later. You don't know. But it's always about connecting to the presence. And within that state, saying, okay, guide me, in complete trust that it's a done deal. You will be guided. There's no like, oh, I'm doubting, I'm fearing. It's just I know this, absolutely know with certainty that a happy yesterday's lesson, a happy outcome to all things is sure, absolutely sure, and just the time will be right. Maybe I get it now. If I don't get it now, that's fine. Maybe it'll drop in later. I'll get it when I need to. And I suppose at the highest level, when you just know, if you are that voice, and that's your only voice, you would just know by default. That's now your default thought system. So you would just know, and that's where we're going with this. That the ego is entirely undone. The Holy Spirit's installed as your operating system, and that just happens. That's the way you now think by default, rather than having to choose between two voices and not being clear about which one is true and which one is false. also leads quite nicely into today's teaching, because when you talk about David Hawkins's map of consciousness and the applied kinesiology, which is, I imagine, what EAM is based on. It's that kind of, okay, well, how do you determine between the truth and illusion? And that can be really helpful when you're starting on the journey. I think at mastery, you go, I don't need the tool anymore. I don't need to muscle test to know. I just know. That's where we're going with this, to get to just a state of knowing where you and the Holy Spirit are one. There is no separation, and your thought system is its thought system, and that's just the way you think. But that is that's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. Okay, any other comments on that? Sue, any thoughts to share? Okay, well, I'll share my screen then, speaking of sharing. So let's just dive into the lesson for today and the quote. So if you can have a read of that, Sally, read the quote to kick it off. Can you read that? You need me to make it bigger?
So brought the laptop closer, that makes it bigger. Yeah. What will be left of all the fearing and wanting associated with your problematic life situation that every day takes up most of your attention? A dash 1 or 2 inches long between the date of birth and the date of death on your gravestone. To the egoic self, this is a depressing thought. To you, it is liberating. Yeah, it's liberating. It's like, don't worry about it. It's just a dash.
It's great spiritual practice. Go into a graveyard. Just spend a few minutes looking at all the graves, hundreds of these graves. They were all people at one point who had fears, desires, all kinds of, no doubt, chaotic thoughts, crazy stuff going on in their lives. And now, what is it? A dash. The entire life is just that dash, which kind of makes you go, well, what was the point of it? So it's depressing to the ego, but to the Holy Spirit, it's liberating, because you go, well, none of that matters. There is a transcendent self that is beyond this. It's beyond birth and death and all the stuff that goes on in between, in the dash. And I am that. I am that presence. So fear, desire, all the drama of the ego just doesn't need to touch me.
Yesterday, I found an uncle I didn't know I had. Okay. And I'd got his date of birth and where he was in the family tree, my mum's brother. And I'd never heard of him, wondered if he was still alive and who he was and what's the story behind it. And I thought, it doesn't matter, does it? But anyway, I did find out he died. But it was just interesting. It's like in the illusion, I had an uncle I had. He popped up in my family tree. But it doesn't matter. He's one of those gravestones with the dash, a very short dash, apparently. And but it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like we have a yearning to know who we are, but it's not the human who we are, it's the spiritual who we are. I sometimes, I've never been that interested in my family history, but I'm trying to say that's not what I'm looking for, is it? I'm not looking for lost uncles. I'm looking for really. Home.
Yeah, everyone's looking for their source. Where do I come from? And the ego substitutes, as it always does, and says, well, you come from this family and you have this family tree and da 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 da, and then it gets you to focus on that. My dad's obsessed with family trees, and because he's cut off from spirit, so there's no like, oh, actually that really doesn't matter, because it's the illusion. That becomes then the substitute reality for the spirit. And of course, they all die. Sadly, everyone in your family tree, most of them are dead, and those are living, are going to die. So it's all a bit morbid, really. And you think all these characters who had these lives, and no one remembers them. No one. Their lives must have been really important to them. Their lives were very important. All their stuff, their fears and their expectations and their dreams and their hopes and their goals would have been very important to them at the time. Now you're like, no one remembers at all. Just a name, date of birth, date of death, a dash on the gravestone or in the family tree, and no one has any idea who that person was or what their history was, or so, the further back you go, no one remembers, do that. Maybe a generation or two, there's some memory, but beyond that, go 100, 200 years in your family tree, no one remembers that person. And yet, when they were alive, their life was very important to them, and they thought, their world and reality and thoughts and fears and hopes and dreams and expectations were very important. So I love this quote because it just really brings us to the very stark truth. Death ultimately means that all of it is meaningless. If it only comes to death, our human life, what was the point? Everything fades away and dies in the dream. And the ego is going to try and justify it and say, oh, well, in between, it's important for that time. But again, I remind you what Yeshua said, the only determiner of value is something permanent, or is it temporary? If it's permanent, then it has value. If it's temporary, it has no value whatsoever. That's the decision tool. So anything that is not permanent, it has no value at all because it's illusory and it's really just a substitute for what's permanent, which makes your life quite easy to decide. Well, that pretty much covers everything that you experience in this world. Everything's impermanent. Family, your life, your fears, your doubts, your expectations, your dreams, it's all going to fade away and be undone. So why are you stressing about it? When it's all going to be in 100 years. I mean, the exercise I asked you to do, we'll get there. We'll get there just now. Let's read the first paragraph first. So do you want to read the first paragraph?
Today's quote by Eckhart Tolle really puts all the fears and expectations that preoccupy so many people's minds in their proper context. Why do we fear or desire anything when these movements of the egoic mind, which remember is just a belief in separation, with all the desires and fears that are its inevitable result, are so impermanent? So as a mind training exercise that will lead you nicely in today's lesson from the Course in Miracle Workbook, pause for a few moments. Take a deep breath in through your nose.
So let's do it.
Go on then, you do it.
Okay. So just breathe in, take a deep breath in, close your eyes, and just ask yourself a question that Eckhart does, but in the first person. So why do I desire or fear anything? And these movements of my ego, mind, and what it desires or fears are so impermanent. Why do I do that? And just kind of listen to the answer. Notice any thoughts or emotions that arise in response to this question. And now, when it seems appropriate, just ask yourself if anything that you're fearing or wanting right now will matter at all in 100 years. Is any of this going to matter at all? Fast forward 100 years. This character of Sally is gone. No one remembers you. All these thoughts and emotions that you're currently so preoccupied with will be gone. None of it will matter. So why then are you dwelling on these things? None of it will matter. Remembering that only what is permanent is valuable, and anything else that is impermanent is valueless by definition. And so just notice how you feel now, a little bit more surrendered perhaps, released from whatever those thoughts and emotions were, desires, expectations, fears, all judgments of the mind that attach you to this world. So this question, you can ask yourself this question frequently. It's another powerful tool or pointer to the truth. Why do I desire or fear anything? In these movements of my egoic mind, what it desires or fears is so impermanent. You really ask that question honestly, you can't continue to think the thoughts and feel the emotions because it becomes ridiculous. You see through the illusion of the ego. Such importance placed on such ephemeral stories populate our minds and our world. Why would you continue to do that? Instead, you could just let them go and see the nothingness that they really are. Let go of your attachment to everything, people, things, events, circumstances of this world, and free your mind to the truth, which is that you are the pure formless oneness of perfect love. Beyond time and space and name and form, and all these events and circumstances and people and things, lies your true awareness. So just sink into that awareness for a few moments. Observe your breath. Notice the freedom, inner freedom that arises just from doing a simple exercise like this. Okay, how you felt and how you feel now with how you felt 5 minutes ago. Notice the contrast and the difference. There's just an empty, open, spacious awareness in your mind now. Not a lot of thoughts. Just acknowledge that this awareness is what you really want. It's the essence of who you really are. Beyond name and form. Anything in this world. And so just anchor the state in by noticing it. With the intention to stay there for the rest of the session in the afternoon. No matter what arises, you can always return to this awareness because it never goes away. It is our foundational awareness, foundation of the truth. And so when you're ready, just going to gently open your eyes. Look around and always just spend a few moments noticing you come back how different you feel compared with when you started the meditation. Because that tunes you into the difference between the Holy Spirit and the ego. So just clock that, notice it. The more you notice it, the more you anchor that state in, and it starts to become your default state of awareness, which is why we do all this practice, so that this meditative state of mind becomes your default state of mind. Okay, so how's that?
Yeah, lets it all go, doesn't it?
Just a simple question. So it's another way of letting go. You'd say if you're stressing about anything, say, well, is this going to matter at all in 100 years? And the answer is no. It's absolutely not. So why are you stressing about it now? And that should help you just go into that awareness beyond it, the pure formless awareness, perfect love we call it, where you rest in that awareness that's timeless, that isn't concerned with what's happening in the illusion. It's just resting in the being that it is. Okay, so thought we look at the map of consciousness. So we haven't really spent that much time on it. I think I've referred to it every now and then, but maybe not as much as some of the other tools. And you'll be familiar with it because of the EAM stuff, but
Yeah.
it's worth looking at as another pointer, another tool pointer to the truth. You want to read? Looks like Sue's finally got her call going. So do you want to read that paragraph, and to help you understand?
And to help you understand where fear and desire, or craving as Buddhists sometimes call it, sit relative to other emotions on a scale of consciousness. Here's the map of consciousness developed by Dr. David Hawkins, based on thousands of hours of muscle testing people exposed to different emotional energies, a technique known as applied kinesiology or coherence verification that you can read more about or read his groundbreaking book entitled Power versus Force that explains this technique in even more detail. Yeah, I used to do a lot of work with this consciousness, map of consciousness. And, where am I on the scale? And oh yeah, that means that, and that means that. And I haven't played much with it lately.
Well, it's a useful tool to go, okay, if I'm in fear, I'm feeling fear, or I've got this desire, some kind of expectation going on, where do I calibrate? Okay, 100 or 125. Now, this isn't a lot of scientific materialists will go, we'll prove it. This is, but the point is, it's not meant to be proven. It's just a tool to be used. So it's calibrated it there at 100 or 125, based on many, many different muscle tests by thousands of people, as I understand. So this is kind of a universal calibration, just as a way of showing you where you are. Okay, so if I'm fearing and I'm desiring, this is where I'm at. I'm above grief and apathy and guilt and shame, which is at least something, because these are all very past oriented. So you look at the scale from 20 to 100 is very past oriented, isn't it? Stuck in the past. Guilt, shame, apathy, which would be depression, because you're depressed about your past, grief, all past looking. So very low energy, because there's nothing you can do to change the past. If you just keep dwelling on it, you'll just get stuck in those energies. So at least fear, although it's not ultimately positive, is a step upwards, because you're actually starting to look at the future, which can be changed. So it's somewhat of an improvement from being stuck in the past, although your perception of the future would still be negative, because you're worrying. There's anxiety, and so it's going to cause you unhappiness and suffering. At least you're out of the past, which is helpful. So you see these levels. So someone who's stuck in guilt or shame might need to upgrade themselves to fear to start with, before they can go beyond it all to, say, courage. So fear then looks ahead, and fear looks outward and says, well, it's still related to the past, because if the past has been bad, then fear says, well, the past has been bad, then the future is likely to be bad as well. And so I have this, this anxiety. A lot of people don't really know exactly why. It's just called existential anxiety. They just think that everything's not right, and they're fearful of everything. They're fearful that they're going to get sick. They're fearful they're going to die. They're fearful they're not going to have enough money, and on it goes. And because it's actually, the real fear is the existential anxiety of the ego, because the ego is not real, and so it ultimately fears its annihilation, and at the same time desires it, which is why fear and desire are very connected. So desire, again, is a little bit above a fear, because it's a bit more positive. You're saying, well, I actually want something. No one generally consciously chooses something negative. So you're moving in some kind of positive direction. But as the Buddha noticed, the more you do that, and the more you desire something, the more you suffer, because you're actually saying, I don't have it right now, and I'm feeling lacking now. And underlying all desire is the fear that you won't have your desire, your expectation. So you expect, just remember in your own life, when you have times when you really have a strong expectation of something, what attends that expectation? Always fear, doesn't it? Remember when I was on my Goic trip trying to become the world champion, I had this, really intense desire, but I also had almost an equally intense fear that I wouldn't do it. That would kind of just haunt me. And I was like, well, I trained hard and I did stuff, but I was being driven by fear and desire, which is not a positive energy, and ultimately will be destructive, which is probably why I often didn't play very well. And I found it emotionally very difficult, because I would build myself up with a desire, and then I'd say lose a match to some guy who wasn't even close to the level I wanted to be, and it would just bring me crashing back down into the despair. I remember going into these times sometimes, really just deep depression for a while, and then I'd pick myself up again by getting back on the desire treadmill. So, okay, well, if I visualize it even more and I go there, then I'll achieve it. What the mind of man can conceive and believe it can achieve, I will do this. So, in a way, it was good mind training, because I was training myself to persist, and I did pull myself out of the, those dark times, but it still wasn't positive. And only later, when I started to let go of all that, I realized what I'd been doing to myself. I was tormenting myself, and I wasn't very happy. I wasn't present. I wasn't happy. I was always living for the future. One day I'll be the champion, and then then I'm going to be made. That's just that's just going to be the perfect life. And even if I'd got there and I'd achieved my goal, I probably would have been disappointed, because it just would never have lived up to it. I might have gone, actually, it's not so great, because if I'm at the top, let's say, become world number one, everyone wants to pull you down, don't they? Everyone wants to beat you. No doubt, everyone, people are sniping at you, and I might have found it not a very nice world. I don't think competitive sport at the top level is very nice. It's not a loving, kind environment. It's pretty hard-nosed, ruthless. So you're not going to find unconditional love there. In fact, you're going to find the opposite. So I realized subsequently, I'm very glad I did all of this, because I needed to experience it. But all I can say is thank God I'm out of it, and thank God I didn't achieve my goal. I'm very happy now that I didn't. I probably wouldn't be doing this stuff. I would have, if I had, I suppose I would have followed, the ego's track, which was, well, become a motivational speaker and teach people how to achieve their egoic goals, and because you've done it, you can show other people how to do it, and who knows where that would have taken me, but not to the same depth of understanding and knowledge, I think, that I have now. So maybe it would have, the Holy Spirit might have found a way. I might have gone, well, I have it all, and it doesn't mean anything. And then the shift would have come later. But my shift was really doing this fear desire program really intensively, and then realizing when I failed miserably that I was not going to be the world champion. In fact, I hadn't even got close. That's when really the whole system collapsed, and that's actually when I transcended, and I started going into the higher levels of acceptance. And there was a peace that came. I didn't really understand it. It was like I just felt more peaceful than I had for years, because this desire fear program driving my life since I was about 13 until late 20s. So yeah, that was my own experience. Anyone else like to share their experience of some of the lower levels of this ladder, of this map?
Sue?
Oh, I don't know. I have been there a lot.
We've all been there.
Yeah, I feel like I spent a lot of time in despair. And that was going back over my past when it kind of it sort of came up. Yeah, I feel like I feel like that was I don't feel like I'll go there. I mean, I do go there, but not in the same way anymore, because I'm much more aware. So I can feel those emotions, but I feel like I can just let them go. As soon as the awareness comes into play, I can let them go now, and I just see them for what they are, really, an experience. Yeah, I think that's it, really. I much prefer being up the higher end of the scale. I'm feeling those emotions.
You might have times when you do just find yourself falling down the ladder. But the more aware you are, the shorter that time will be. So, oh, apathy again. Oh God, no, that's dreadful. We don't want that for too long. Okay, and then you've got a tool, whatever you use, a letting go process, because it's always going to be just, you need to let go of that energy.
Well, I was actually feeling grief today because Mark it's just his dad's funeral today, so it felt like I was tapping into that energy and just being there in that space. But it was okay. It was okay to do that, and I actually went into a meditation afterwards just to kind of process it, and yeah, I've moved on from it, so it's okay. Yeah.
Oh, so you're not necessarily going to be at the higher levels all the time. It's a scale. You can go up and down it. As I understand the modality, what David Hawkins is saying, well, you have a sort of an average level, most people, where they will tend to gravitate back to. So they might bounce around a bit, but they will tend to go back to that level as sort of their default. And what you're trying to do is upgrade that baseline level and constantly move it up to the next one. And what I like about this is it recognizes that there's a process to this. It's highly unlikely you'll go from guilt and shame to enlightenment instantly. I suppose it is technically possible. It has happened, but generally it's a slow progression for most people. As we read last night, it's a slowly evolving training program for the teacher of God to work through this stuff and evolve upwards and start to go to these higher levels. And then you might have a little episode where the ego comes back and you go temporarily back down into fear or guilt or grief. But if you're aware, it doesn't last very long. You can use this tool, keep it in mind, or have it pinned up somewhere just to show you, okay, I'm feeling grief, that's 75. Okay, I understand, it's negative, I don't want to stay there. This is anything below the level of 200 is negative and therefore life destructive. You don't want to stay in life destructive consciousness for too long, because it's very damaging to you and other people. So it's a tool, just snap out of it, let it go, and so transcend and go higher. So it's transcending these emotions, going higher into these higher reaches, which usually requires the breakthrough level is courage. Okay, so I have the courage to do this. I'm on my hero's journey. I'm going to take this on, as overwhelming as the ego can seem to be. I'm going to take it on, and I'm willing to do something about it. I'm not just going to be the victim of my circumstances anymore and just go, oh well, my life just sucks and that's it. I'm going to consciously start choosing and changing my mind. And that's the fundamental shift that anyone has to make in order to move out of these lower reaches of the ego into the upper ones. Yeah, I have a choice. And that's the courage is, yes, I have a choice. and I choose now to something more positive. And this, courage, you see it as feasible. Okay, it is actually possible to do this. You may still have doubts and you may drop down, but you see it as feasible. And that is a massive shift for a lot of people. If you've been stuck in these lower reaches, in despair or apathy or intense fear and anxiety, then to go, this is actually feasible, is very, very positive and life affirming. So that's when then the shift starts to happen, and the Holy Spirit then slowly starts to upgrade you through these levels, which would be your hero's journey as you learn that. And this process might take many years.
I did feel like I do feel like that the courage bit really kicked in for me when me and my husband split, and I just felt I felt that I'd been very courageous in stepping up and that happening and staying in my own power around it. And I think that was a initial step for me, the step out of the old me, if it was. And I can see when you're saying that, going through the emotions. So I was in the courage place, and I went up, and then I've then had to go back down into all those fear, grief, guilt, shame, all of that. Then had to come up to allow me to go up higher up the level. So,
no, it's an interesting point you make there, because being in this is not necessarily negative as long as you don't stay stuck there. Going there, you need to experience that emotion in order to process it and release it. So if you go into that state, and it can be quite intense and unpleasant, but you're actually willing to let it go and bring in the higher awareness, then that's part of the transformation. So it's not a scale where you're like, right, anything below you should never be in. Ultimately, I guess, that's the truth. And enlightenment, none of these things will exist for you. But while you're journeying there, these states will come and go. And when they do, recognize what it's for. It's there to help you to let go of that energy. And so another layer that you can then undo. So instead of going, oh, this is terrible or awful, you go, no, this is good. It's all good. It's a chance to really go in and process something and let it go, which will then correspond, if you do let go, there's kind of a spring or a rubber band effect. It kind of pulls you up, and it seems to then take you even higher, doesn't it? You might have been at 200, and then you've done some deep processing and letting go, and then you come back and you find, actually, I'm pretty neutral. I'm okay. And so that's how you then advance up the scale, through more letting go. And then, with neutrality, that's a foundation for willingness. Okay, so in neutrality, I'm not negative. I'm just okay with everything. And now I might find from that neutral space, this could be called acceptance. I just accept anything without judging and saying this is bad. So it doesn't pull you down into negative consciousness. That's the foundational stage. Then willingness would be, okay, so I can actually do something positive, and you might feel a little bit of enjoyment. There's a bit of excitement, possibly. Eckhart Tolle's got a 3-level system. He talks about acceptance as a base level of conscious awareness. So if you can't accept something, then you're in resistance. Then that's going to be negative consciousness. But if you can just accept and say, it's okay, I don't have a strong aversion or resistance reaction, then that's neutrality. But that then allows you to go to the next level, which would be enjoyment. So at 310, you could actually have enjoyment of the process. And maybe the third level he talks about in his system of conscious doing would be enthusiasm, where you go, well, I enjoy the process, I enjoy what I do, and I also have this kind of vision, this goal, that this is going somewhere. And so then enthusiasm can come in, but you got to be very careful, because attachment can develop, and if you get attached, then you back down in desire. But if it's like, I'm enjoying the process, and there's just the Holy Spirit's given me like the guidance. It's given me something to do. Like, let's say, talk about Eckhart Tolle, given he did the quote, he got the guidance to move to the US, to the West Coast. And then when he was there, he got the guidance to write The Power of Now. So there was a project, and he said it was just such a strong energy that it moved through him, and he had to do it. And so, you know, that would have been willingness and maybe a bit of enthusiasm. Okay, well, this is something I've got to do, which then just kind of activates the enjoyment into maybe a higher level. And then that's a foundation. If you can get to that consistently, that becomes a foundation for the next level, which is he's called acceptance, enlightenment, acceptance. And the process is the emotion is forgiveness. So forgiveness is emotion, and a bit confusing here, because forgiveness is really a process. But anyway, you know, that's by the by. It's you get the general idea. So that would then be starting to let go of all of it, and you do see this progression happening with some characters that are quite well known. So take Richard Branson. You know, most of his life being very willing, optimistic. You know, he's always trying to make a plan. And I think in the last 10 years, there's more like a kind of statesman-like. Okay, there's a more of a deeper understanding, acceptance, because he's done all that, and now it's sort of transcending into something else. Reason, maybe, you know, higher level reasoning, wisdom, able to just have a sense of perspective. So that's often what happens. If you look at, say, a business person like him, they've done their career and they've done all of this, and then in the latter part of their career, they've become some kind of mentor, you know, the wise mentor guide who's no longer driven by even the optimism energy, but is just quite wise and surrendered. It's kind of transcended it all. At, say, reason, understanding, able to, you know, give wise counsel. And then that would prepare them for the next kind of breakthrough level. So there's a breakthrough level at 100, which is the breakthrough from past to future consciousness. And then another one at 200, where you move from negative to positive. And then another one at 500, which is where you start to go into the upper reaches of spirituality. So love is not reasonable. You can't reason love. So there's been many great thinkers, like, say, Einstein and Isaac Newton and so on, and apparently they all calibrated just below the level of 500 because they didn't quite get the love, because love is a feeling. They were still too much in their minds trying to figure it out. And at love, you just start to feel and say, well, I don't need to figure it out anymore. I just surrender to the feeling of love. And that of course takes you even higher into joy. Love's a foundation for joy, and then peace, where you're starting to get into bliss, illumination. And if you continue on that path, you go to the 700 to 1,000 of enlightenment. He calls it pure consciousness. We call it pure awareness, because consciousness still implies there's a split in your mind, whereas awareness is just beyond, you know, all split. But that's just language and words, semantics, and it's ineffable. You can't really describe it. What's the emotion like in pure formless awareness? Very difficult to put words to it. Bliss, joy, peace, serenity, these are all pointers, but they don't really do it justice. And at that level, the God view is that you are that presence. You are it, and it is you. And life merely is. You're just rooted in the beingness, or true beingness, and there is nothing else. There's no opposite. So this is a non-dual state of awareness. There's no sense of it even being perfect. Interesting. It's actually just is. It is what it is, and you fully accept that, and are rooted in that isness, the isness of being, the ground of being, as some philosophers have called it, which would be pure awareness. Then the awareness of that is awareness of itself, pure formless awareness of perfect love. So you see, I mean, this is just another scale. It's another way of trying to frame this developmental path. Understanding that there is a path to enlightenment, and there are these stages you're going to go through, and this is I think quite helpful. That's why I use it. But again, don't get hung up on and go, okay, well, this is the be all and the end all, and then start playing egoic games. Like, well, I'm higher than you because I calibrated at 200 and you're only at 150. So no, because that's just using it for separation. It's meant to be a tool for self-awareness. To go, well, where am I now, and how can the scale help me to get out of that and go to the next level? And if you realize that I calibrate mainly at optimism, but I want to go higher, then this gives you the next step, doesn't it? Okay, well, I need to start going more into forgiveness and letting go, and listening to the voice, the guidance that's going to take me there, to be the voice of the Holy Spirit, saying, well, this is the next step. And what I like about it is that there's a journey, clearly, that people can take out of the darkness to the light, and there will be these stages in the journey. If you go through all of these levels, there would be these stages that then unfold in your life, and that's the hero's journey then. And you would have different life situations probably unfolding at each stage. So life changes according to the state of consciousness you're in. So you might have a stage where you really went into optimism, and it's very much about doing and making something happen. And then you go beyond that, and you do that for 10 or 20 years, and then suddenly you're going more into forgiveness and letting go, and into these higher reaches. A good example of this actually is Wayne Dyer. You know his story, because he started down here. He was very angry. He had a lot of bitterness and anger towards his dad, who abandoned him and his family. So he probably spent the first part of his life in negative consciousness, somewhere down here, blaming, and then he let that go by his dad's gravestone. Interesting, we're talking about the gravestone today. So he let that go, and then went to courage. That took him into the positive level. That's when he wrote his book, Your Erroneous Zones. In 14 days, became a bestseller. And then he played around in this for a while. It was all about the positivity and the optimism, and you're going to make things happen. And he did that for 10 or 20 years, and then he found he was being called to the higher levels. That writing about your erroneous zones and being concerned about whether he was number 1 or number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list and getting onto the Tonight Show, it just wasn't important to him anymore, because he was being called to these higher levels of reason and love. And towards the end of his life, I don't know if you watched any of his interviews, and just such a lovely surrendered presence. You just really got the feeling that he was coming from at least love, maybe higher, even peace, somewhere between love and peace, I would say. Just a very wise, and so all of that optimism and that striving had been let go of, and he still wrote, he still did it, but he was just doing it out of this higher state, being completely guided. He said his last book was just written for him. He didn't really write it. He just showed up, and it was completely like channeled writing. So there, there's an example. I've given a few examples: Richard Branson and Wayne Dyer, and you could probably do the same thing for many others who are well-known figures who are at some kind of higher level, to see how they've their lives have progressed. And so if you look at your own progression, you can go, okay, well, where am I now, and what's the next step? And that's just part of my journey. It's not like 310 is worse than 500. It's just it's a stage in your development.
I've noticed more and more that I keep without any prompting, I just go into the real love state, and I can just sit there in it, and it will just like suddenly appear within me. And yeah, and then I just sit with it, and it's lovely, and I just enjoy the experience of it. But it's like I don't really know what brings it on. Anyway, it's just a nice, loving state to be in.
Yeah. Let me just message this person. Say I can't speak to them now. So
I'm going to probably jump off the call in a minute because I've got friends are going to turn up at 1:30. It's 1:30 now. They're not here, but I think they might.
Before you go, Sue, it might interest you. When I used to do kinesiology with that chart, I noticed that the lower vibrations, people had bowel problems, and then as you go up the scale, the physical ailments move up the body until it goes above the head. So it's quite interesting linking the physical with the emotional, with the vibration of it all.
And that's interesting because I'm now feeling it here. If I get anxious or anything, I get quite a deep pain here in my chest, like into
the heart.
Yeah, that's interesting. So up the scale we go, hey.
And
yeah,
who
and so
hang out
you know
with as
that
well, isn't it?
another system of sort of developmental rising up would be the chakra system. You know, the Eastern. So they talk about the lower chakras rising up into the higher chakras. It kind of mirrors this. Let me just share my screen again. At these higher levels, you would then be associated, more in the higher chakras. So at ineffable pure consciousness, your seventh chakra will be wide open, and you just be connected via that. But instead of getting attached to the system, and a lot of people go, well, that's the truth. No, it's just another system. It's a pointer. It's a roadmap. It's a signpost, whatever you want to call it. It's a way out of the dream. Whichever system you use, you could use David Hawkins's to kind of calibrate where you are. It's a map. That's what it is. But the map is not the territory. So the map isn't the reality. The map is just a pointer to help you to learn what that reality is, and to navigate it, to take the next step. So that's useful for a while, but when you're at the destination, it's not useful. Once you're in these higher reaches, the map wouldn't mean anything. You don't need it because you're already there. But if you stuck down in fear and desire, then the map could be very helpful to help you to get out of it. So yeah, that's the way to view it, and the way to use it as a tool to help you take the next step and help you on your hero's journey. Okay, any other thoughts, comments, questions on that?
I did think that the lower vibrations are special relationships and the higher vibrations are holy relationships.
Yeah, they would correspond. And if you're in a special relationship, there'd be a lot of this going on. Guilt, shame, fear, desire, anger, pride, all these kinds of things. And that the special relationship is a fertile ground for all of these to breed, and that's the purpose of the special relationship, is to keep you stuck in these. And you have to transcend the conception of what the relationship is for in order to go beyond. So the relationship actually isn't for any of this. There's really no point in fear and grief and apathy and all of this stuff and experiencing these. And if that's what the relationship is doing, there's no point to it. So the only point is to transcend and start to feel the love that's really there. Which would then, if both people do that, the relationship would be a way of raising themselves up the scale. Forgiveness of this. I need to let it go. You just forgive your special partner, and that's going to take you up to 350, which is pretty high on the scale, and prepare you for unconditional love at 500. So you can start to see that whatever context you look at it, whether you look at it from a business point of view or you look at it from relationships or health-wise, you see the correlations. You see how this can be useful. What I like about it is he took a scientific approach to it. So he was trying to kind of merge science into this. And the big thing for science is they don't really understand consciousness. It doesn't fit into the traditional scientific materialist model. So David Hawkins he was a doctor and a scientist as well. He was trying to bring science into consciousness and map it out and use some of the tools of science like calibration and testing and some kind of objective scientific process to then map out consciousness. And I think he's done, as best a job as you can do, because ultimately you're talking about different realities. In the end, this points you beyond any measurement. There's no limitations and no definitions and no levels in spirit, but it's useful to help you to get out of the dream. So I think he did a pretty good job. He was one of the first pioneers who were like, okay, let's try and merge these fields of science and spirituality, and this map of consciousness was his attempt to do that, so that it becomes more understandable, especially if you're sort of more scientific person who understands the numbers. And this is a log scale, so it's to the power of 10 to the power of 20, 10 to the power of 30, 10 to the power of 1,000, which is an enormous number. That's 10 with 999 zeros afterwards. That's just incomprehensibly large. But just to give us an indication of what it's the power that's available, as you can see, this sit well within the range of negative emotional states, fear and desire, measuring 100 to 125 on the log scale, goes up to complete enlightenment at level of 1,000, which is 10 to the power of 1,000, to symbolize the immensity of the presence that you would feel at this highest level. We can't even conceive of how big a number that 10 to 1,000 is, and I think that's why he's used a log scale rather than just a number saying 1,000, because it's so much exponentially bigger on a log scale. And apparently, one person at the level of 1,000 counteracts the entire negativity of everyone else in the human race. Again, there's you can't prove that, but it's interesting to consider it, that because there's so much power that can come through that person, like a Yeshua or Buddha, is so powerful that we have seen that demonstrated in history, that these people did counteract huge negativity and made really were catalysts for transformation of society, which we've benefited from. Imagine if Yeshua hadn't lived and we hadn't had whole development of Christianity. Before that, it was pretty barbaric. People just were killing others, slavery, all of that was okay in the world pre-Christianity. Certainly the Western world, maybe not so much in the East, although I think there was still a lot of that. And then suddenly it became unacceptable. You had Christian values saying, no, you have to love and you have to forgive, and that came into prevalence, whereas before very few people had even considered those ideas. And so that then was part of the upgrading the consciousness to allow the society we currently have, where you do have things, you do have laws and rules that say you can't hurt people, you can't steal. That's against the law, and that's now part of general consciousness. Whereas in barbaric times it wasn't. You could just go and kill someone and that was all right. So we have actually significantly upgraded as a species over the last 2,000 years, even though it doesn't always seem like it. Generally, the levels, I think David Hawkins was saying it's just below 200, but it may well have gone above 200 now, the general consciousness of humanity. I don't know what it sits at currently. I guess you could do a muscle test on it. So Sally, maybe you want to just, I know this is your thing, just explain how it works for anyone out there, how the applied kinesiology actually the process of muscle testing actually works?
Do I even remember? So it's just it used to be where you tested a muscle, you chose a muscle, usually the deltoid, and you'd push down gently on it. You're feeling the energy of it, not the strength of the muscle. And then you'd be able to get a yes or no answer from what the person is thinking. So if they say, I don't know, I forgive whatever, and the muscle might say, no, you don't. Even though in their head they might think they do, but their energy says you're not in forgiveness. So kinesiology uses different finger modes to identify if it's an emotional, mental, physical, chakra, energetic issue. And then, you get the client to release and let go of whatever it is, talk them through it a bit, and then you can retest the muscle and say, I forgive now. And if it's a strong arm, it will show that the energy is flowing really well on that subject. You're in a weakened state. When your energy is depleted, your arm would show up energetically weak. When you're in a powerful position, your arm stays really strong. So it's just a way of reading your own energy. It's like intuition, but sometimes we get cut off from our intuition. So somebody else to sense your energies for you sometimes. But it helps people see the muscle testing. I use it as the whole body muscle testing now, but even when I used it as an arm test, it showed the person what they were thinking, which they weren't aware of, and it showed them subconscious thoughts and beliefs, which in itself is, once it's in their conscious mind, in their awareness, and they're more easily able to let it go.
Yeah, so it can be very helpful, very helpful tool if you're not sure, and you've blocked out spirit. Then it's a tool that can help you to become aware of again of it. At the higher levels, you don't need it because you just know. As Carl Jung said, I just know. It's like I know that it's the truth, and there's no testing or anything needed. But while we're there, as you've seen, you can use it to help people to become aware of a resistance. Okay, so you say you've forgiven, but you haven't really, and I'm not. It's not just me saying it. It's like your body's confirming, and you can feel it. And I think because it comes through them and their body, they tend to believe it more, don't they? Rather than someone else saying, "Well, you're in resistance." And they go, "No, I'm not. I've really let that person. I have let it go." Okay, well, let's test that, because the idea is that the body doesn't lie because it's energetic. So it's not just the mind that can spin a story. It goes to a deeper energy level, doesn't it? And it doesn't lie. So then it becomes a tool to discern the truth from the illusion, which is the whole process. That's what we're trying to learn with all of this work. Discern the truth from the illusion. Well, if it temporarily helps you to do that, then it can only be a good thing. But ultimately, you want to transcend it. Not getting stuck in the tool.
But if somebody's in ego, like somebody just rung me up while we were on the call just now and said they've got eczema and they wanted to be allergy tested, and so they're just thinking physical ailment, I want to get rid of it, then I explained to her about the mental emotional aspect of it, and just telling her that opens her up to more information. She might get an inkling that she's stressed when she gets eczema. And it just it broadens your awareness, isn't it? It takes you from, I've got to fix this thing, to, oh, well, maybe there's an aspect of me that I can do something about that. And I just think it's very helpful. But I like doing EAM because it's the whole body sway. And quite often we'll sway on something, and the sway will go forward for a yes. And we'll say, oh, I got a no. And then other people watch will go, no, you got a yes. Because we're so in denial. It's like when you gave us a film the other day and you said Tom Hanks is in it, and you gave us another one without Tom Hanks in it or something like that, wasn't it? You were so convinced that was the right thing, that sometimes we have that with our energy. We're so sure on the subject that even if the evidence is your whole body moves forward, you're still in denial. So sometimes it's easy to do it with somebody else.
Yeah, well, that's the benefit of. It's kind of an objective tool. I think that's the key. It's objective. It can't really be manipulated, as I understand. I mean, I'm sure people have tried, but it doesn't lie. The body doesn't lie. So you can't, because it's a direct link to the mind. So you've got a tool then for some kind of objective map of where you are, and without the distortions of the thinking mind coming in and distorting it. No, I don't believe that, because it's just your thought. But the energy doesn't lie, because you're going then to the deeper level of feeling, emotion. And so, good on David Hawkins. He's somehow managed to using tools of science and calibrating and log scales and all of this, somehow managed to map consciousness in a way that's credible, that even scientists wedded to their scientific materialist paradigm have started to pay attention and go, well, yeah, maybe we need to look at this, because the big kind of hole in scientific materialist science is consciousness. They can't explain it. It doesn't fit into the models. It's like everything they say is just these quarks and particles and energy fields, and it's like, yeah, but it's not everything, because where does consciousness fit into that? Well, I say, well, consciousness is part of the field. Well, now you're starting to get somewhere. Maybe consciousness is the field. That's the whole point. Consciousness is the whole field. It's all of it. So actually, your quantum field is the projection of mind, is consciousness, which still, in Course in Miracles terms, is within the domain of the ego, because it's all a projection of the idea of separation, you see. But at least you're getting somewhere. You're starting to go, but it's actually all mind. The universe is more like a great thought than a great machine, said one of the early quantum physicists, a guy called James Jeans. So you're starting to go in the right direction, aren't you? To just, yes, it's all mind, away from ascribing physical causes. And I guess the genius of the muscle testing is he's using the physical, but to point beyond the physical, which is helpful. Because a lot of people are like, the mind scares them. So it's like, okay, well, let's have a little intermediary. You're gonna muscle test. You're using the body, but it's pointing you to a deeper level of mind, and that's quite useful and ingenious. So the man was really a genius, and he obviously had a calling to do this and leave the world with this work. So we can now discuss it and use it and learn from it, and everyone benefits. Interesting. They've his publishers, I noticed a little copyright notice saying no one may reproduce this, because it's I'm going, that's just absolute nonsense. That is exactly what force would do. Through power would say, this is freely available, give it away. This is something the world needs to know about. So I just used it anyway. Sue me if you want to, because well, who knows, maybe they'll take this down from YouTube, because I've shown it. But so what?
Well, if you do get taken down, then you cracked it, haven't you? You know you're in the right direction.
Yes. So any other thoughts on the map of consciousness?
No, that's good.
Okay, so let's have a look at the how long have you got today, Sally? So no?
I haven't really got a time limit. I'm just waiting for my new lodger to turn up.
Okay, so we'll just keep going. So go to lesson 293 then, and we'll have a look at.
Oh, I think I can hear that. I'm going to go now. Sorry, guys.
Bye. See you.
Okay. See ya.
See you Sunday. Bye.
See
you next week. Bye.
Bye.
All right, so back to, this is insert 8, that is given in answer to the question, what is the real world?
Okay. The real world is a symbol, like the rest of what perception offers. Yet it stands for what is opposite to what you made. Your world is perceived through eyes of fear and brings the witness of terror to your mind. Terror, blimey. The real world cannot be perceived except through eyes letting go blesses. Through eyes letting go blesses. Huh? I don't remember that in there last time. The real world cannot be perceived except through eyes letting go blesses. Okay, so they see a world where terror is impossible and witnesses to fear cannot be found.
Yeah.
Funny, isn't it, how you hear things differently every time you read it, and you feel the energy just goes yeah. Okay, get out.
So the letting go is the blessing on your sight, on your perception. So there's pointing us to within, saying, you know, the world is, the real world is the world reinterpreted. So you think you see with the body's eyes, but actually you see with the mind's eye, because it's the interpretation of the images that your eyes show you that's really important. That's what gives them the reality they have. And that's what makes up the world that we think we live in. Perception. So you have the kind of raw data of the world coming in, and you see things and you hear sights, and so that's all coming in, and there's not that much you can do about that while you're in perception, but you can change your interpretation of that completely, and when you do, that's the real world. The eyes that letting go blesses, and ears and all of your senses. Just, it's a decision in your mind to see it differently. So you see the terror is impossible, and witnesses to fear cannot be found. So whatever you see just doesn't witness to fear anymore, because you realize that it's all illusion. None of it's true. So the Holy Spirit just tells you, teaches you, an illusion is an illusion is an illusion. It doesn't matter how big it is, how scary it seems to be, it's all illusory. And so you apply that very simple teaching to everything that you experience.
Did I tell you about my experience when I couldn't hear the fan heater and I didn't feel the heat because I couldn't hear it? But once I could hear the fan heater, I felt the heat, and I went, oh, it's all in the mind. It's like, you know it until you experience it. Once you experience it, it's like, wow. I kept playing with it. I put these ear cancelling headphones, and definitely when I didn't hear the fan heater, I couldn't tell if the fan heater was off or on. But when I took it out and could hear it, I got hot and I got cold. Yeah, it's just fascinating.
So you start to see that it's all perceptual. Your experience is so perceptual, and none of that is really true. It's based on your mind's interpretation, which is why yogis can, you know, they can stick their bodies or parts of their bodies into freezing cold water and actually raise their body temperature. That's possible. Yeah, these things have been done because it's all perceptual. They realize that, you know, there's nothing outside of them, so they make a decision and they change their mind, and then they change the body, and then they override the default program that says, well, when you stick your hand in freezing cold water, then, you know, you should get cold. These programs are overridable with enough awareness.
Yeah,
and
so it's like,
people go, well, how do you do that? Well, it's just because they're not bound to the normal program anymore. They don't believe that that's true.
yeah, it's like that thing the other day. I think I shared that when you drink alcohol, you believe you're going to get drunk, or whatever your belief system about your tolerance to alcohol, you'll live it out. And in truth, it's neutral. But it's interesting to think that, you know, our sight isn't real and our hearing's not real. It's all an inner perception. So somebody that's blind or someone that's deaf, they've got an advantage over us, really, because they're using other sense, aren't they? That they're not just taking it as, oh, I have to see to believe this illusion.
They have to go within, and they have to find the truth within them without the distractions of the sights and sounds of the world. So, I mean, Helen Keller is a fantastic example of that. She's blind and deaf, and yet attained, you know, a great understanding and wisdom. So in some ways there was an advantage because she didn't have those distractions. So she had to go into the inner world and live in that inner domain, and then manifest it through her thoughts and words and actions. And so, you know, we think of these things as a blessing. Oh, well, I can see and I can hear, but But actually that's the program for enslaving us. Those sense perceptions then by default seem to create an interpretation that it's all real in your mind, and that keeps you in the ego, which is why most spiritual practices, they often involve withdrawing the senses, so you'll close your eyes, so you don't have the visual stuff bombarding you, and maybe you'll go into a quiet room or somewhere where there's not a lot of noise, because you're going within, you're trying to remove those distractions of the external world. And ultimately, those shouldn't matter if you're really rooted in source. Whatever's going on just wouldn't matter. You don't hear it. People who've been in the zone, they've asked them, well, didn't you see that? Didn't you hear that? And they just didn't. They don't even see it or hear it, because they're just so in their inner experience. So for them, it wasn't even happening. If reality is perceptual, it might have happened for others, but it didn't happen for them, which it freaks the scientists out, because they're like, well, reality is not reality. It's so individualized. But that's how it works. Depending on your perception, your reality is going to be different. So if you don't perceive something, then it's not real for you. It's not there. And so your reality and someone else's reality, you might be in the same place at the same time, seemingly experiencing the same thing, but you can have completely different experiences of that reality. And then, if you listen to like eyewitness accounts sometimes of traumatic events, like one person's experience, another totally different. But you were standing in the same place, looking at the same thing. How can it be so different? This is what the mind perceives, makes it different. And one person sees something, but they see what their eyes want them to see. So one person might really focus on the horror, and this is terrible. And another might go, I didn't even see that. I was vaguely aware something was going on, but I didn't really see any of it. It didn't bother me.
We had a chat going along the path outside the house in the middle of the night one night, and we all heard it, but we all had these different viewpoints. So I just thought, he's had a good night out, he's drunk, he's enjoying a good shout. Somebody else thought he was suicidal and needed saving, called 999. Someone else thought, I must rush out and save him, he's going to go in the river and drown himself. And it's just fascinating, isn't it? Yeah.
Everyone's interpretation varies, and that interpretation is based on their ego, their story, their self-concept. So none of that's reality. That's just interpretive. It's an interpretation. Reality is beyond interpretation. Reality just is. And that's, of course, where we're going. By recognizing that all of these interpretations are false, ultimately, the Holy Spirit helps you to see that only that isness of your being that's beyond interpretation is what you want. That's the only thing to want and go for. Okay, so the happy with number 1.
Yep.
Number 2, the real world holds a counterpart.
The real world holds a counterpart for each unhappy thought reflected in your world, a sure correction, the sights of fear and sounds of battle which your world contains. Sorry, something just cropped in my mind. So I was told once that for every happy thought, there's an unhappy thought. So if you spend a lot of time in a happy place, you're actually creating the opposite energy somewhere else. And
okay, interesting dualistic belief system.
Yeah.
Who told you that?
Some guru type person.
And
I never bought into it. But I thought I wonder how that all ties in. Is it a fear? Maybe they're in the fear of a guilt of feeling good. So they've got to create some story I shouldn't feel good because other people will feel bad. It's a bit like the money thing. If I have money, I'm taking it away from somebody else. Maybe that's the dualistic.
Well, it's based on scarcity, lack. There's not enough good to go around, so there's always going to be a negative. But that's classic ego thinking. So based on the idea of sacrifice. So I win, someone else must lose. If I'm feeling positive, someone else must be feeling negative because it has to balance. But that's duality, isn't it? And it's making that negative real and as important as the positive. And so that person would probably have had a belief system that, well, it's all part of reality. The good and the bad, the up and the down, the light and the dark, all part of reality, and you have to accept it all and somehow manage with it all. But that's not non-dual at all. And in the end, doesn't make sense because you're going, well, then reality is split. There's a fundamental contradiction which cannot be reconciled within that thought system. You will always have a contradiction and a split in your mind, and therefore not be at peace. So, well, I'm feeling really good, but ego reminds you someone else has got to feel bad, and sooner or later you will too, because that's just the way it goes. Positive and negative must balance. Fortunately, Yeshua is coming to our rescue and saying, no, that's just a load of codswallop. That's nonsense. That's just the ego trying to justify itself. Actually, there is no balance in perfect oneness. There's nothing to balance. There's only perfect oneness. So the ideas of balance and opposites and duality just collapse. They're not there anymore. There's only perfect oneness or love, and that's all that is. And you realize everything else is simply not there. So he's saying rise above the sights of fear and sounds of battle which your world contains. Counterpart for each unhappy thought. So that's the correction. You have the unhappy thought that's false. There's a correction, which is what the Holy Spirit does. Helps you to let go of that thought and that emotion in that context, and realize that actually there's only the happiness, and there's only the truth that underlies this unhappy thought. I like the idea of transcending the battleground. He talks about rising above the battleground. Battleground is duality. The battleground is where there seems to be a conflict between two thought systems, which is irreconcilable and unresolvable. You can't actually resolve that conflict as hard as you try. This is the only way. This is non-dual teaching. It's the only way you're going to resolve the conflict. There's no other way. As long as you hold on to the dualistic perception, then someone just delivered something.
Okay, number 2. The real world shows a world perceived differently through quiet eyes and with a mind at peace. Nothing but rest is there. There are no cries of pain or sorrow heard, for nothing there remains beyond letting go. And the sights are gentle. Only happy sights and sounds can reach the mind that has released itself. It's nice.
So that's the application. Nothing but rest. No cries of pain and sorrow heard. Just don't see it. Don't give it a reality. All the sights are gentle. So a lot of people struggle with this. They say, well, how can you look on pain and suffering and sickness and death? It seems to be so prevalent in the world, and see that all the sights are gentle and just not hear the cries of pain and sorrow. And the ego will say to you, well, how callous and how uncaring. That's not loving at all. You need to acknowledge their suffering and try and do something about it. But in true perception, you just don't see it because you realize it's not real. And then you guide it accordingly. It doesn't mean you wouldn't help, but you're helping from a different state of mind. So Yeshua, he was a healer and he helped many people who were sick and suffering, but he helped them by helping them to transcend their ego. He was the demonstration that it could be done, and he helped them to let go of the belief system in it that was enslaving them, and that's how he did his healing. And he's saying, okay, I'm going to heal you. I'm the great teacher or master, and I'm going to heal you. No, I'm just going to help you to find that healing presence in your own mind through my own example. And then the healing will happen anyway. And it's not really me who's doing it.
Well, the healing's already happened, hasn't it? It's just perceiving it.
Yeah, I think he understood that. He was like, it's already done. So he just held the frequency so well. There was no doubt. Held that. And in those days, I think people had more faith. So people tapped into that. And there was this whole frequency that developed around him of deep faith. And then people healed. One lady touched his cloak and was healed of some disease. And he said, who's touched me? He said, I have, sir. He said, I felt power flowing. And he said, it's not me who's done it. It's your faith that's made you well. Because it was her own belief that changed her mind. It did it, but she needed him as the catalyst. In her mind, if she touched his cloak, then that was the thing that she needed to believe. She couldn't believe it otherwise. Actually, she could have just done it with her mind, but she wasn't quite there yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, comments on number 2?
No. Much calmer this time than I was last time I read that.
Okay. So what is he saying there? You want to summarize it? See how that comes out?
The real world is perception. Nothing else is there except the truth.
The real world is just perceived correctly.
If you hear pain and sorrow, it's your own reflected back to you.
So you just choose not to. Really simple. Choose not to change your perception and you're free.
Yeah, I say that to people sometimes. They say, oh, I'm having heart palpitations. And I say, choose not to. Because they want to go into the whole ego, I've got heart failure or whatever it might be. And to me, it's very simple. But when you're in it, it's not so simple, is it?
No, because it's a thought system. And you're so used to that thought system. And you've taken that thought system as the truth. So now someone comes along and says, no, this isn't true. It rocks your world. There's huge resistance. He said, the fear of the truth might be so intense that the person would rather get sick or even die than accept it. Because the entire world is going to be rocked. If you speak it to them, they don't want to hear. So I said to someone who's got COVID, and she'd had a booster a month ago, and then another flu shot last week. And I said, well, it hasn't worked, has it? Clearly, you're really sick. Oh no, well, I might have been even worse. The justification, I might have been even worse if I hadn't had the vaccines. Talk about, you just like, do you not want to see? But the point is that they will see what they want to see. And the idea that actually they could be wrong threatens the entire thought system. So they won't accept that. They'd rather do the vaccines and get sick than accept, okay, actually maybe this person is speaking the truth, and I could really benefit from listening. So it's don't take any more. Give your body a chance to recover from being pummeled with whatever stuff they put in there. You have no idea what you're putting in your body. It's never a good idea.
More the vibration of it, isn't it? The intent that goes with it and all that.
Yeah, well, it's a thought system of death. So what can you expect then? The thought system based on sickness and death is not going to heal. It's going to cause more sickness and death.
I was just thinking, maybe some people have a fear of there being nothing wrong with them. It's an interesting thought, or fear of there being nothing to fear.
Yeah. The only fear we have is fear itself, I think said Franklin D. Roosevelt. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. But it's because it's so much part of their identity. There's people who've made it part of their identity, sickness. And the thought of being free of that means that their identity is threatened. Well, who would I be if I wasn't a sick person? And that scares them. And so they'll hold to the sickness, even though it's painful and they suffer and ultimately they're going to die, rather than going through the discomfort of saying, okay, well, actually that whole self-concept based on sickness and being a victim is just not true. That's not me. You'd think, well, hallelujah, I'm not a sick person, I'm not a victim. Surely I would rejoice, but they don't. Because the intensity of the mind's attachment to that identity is it's so extreme that they see this as their death, not as life. It's totally upside down, but that's what you're dealing with. And if someone is fixated on it and not open to it, it's very, very difficult to shift them, because they just reject everything you say. And they'll say, no, that's not the case. I've talked about this, vaccine issue till I'm blue in the face with my family. They won't listen. Just no, blank it out. Any reason, okay, well, let's look at this reasonably. Is there actually any evidence that these things work? And there isn't. No one's given you any evidence whatsoever that they work. And yet you still believe it. But it doesn't matter what you say, because they want to believe what they want to believe. Based on their self-concept, you see. So you're going up against this very stubborn, resistant self-concept we call the ego. And if they don't want to change, they won't.
I had a girl a few days ago, and she'd got like a wrist brace on, quite a hefty wrist brace. And she said it's a regular thing. She wouldn't just be able to have a comfortable wrist. It would be in pain and ache and everything. And it would go away for a while and it would come back again. And I just suggested that she could let it go today. And she hasn't had any pain, and she's, a completely different person. And just because somebody suggested she could let it go. It's so nice when you get an email back and go, absolutely fine now. Don't need the brace anymore. And you go, yeah, change of mind. Sometimes it's very easy.
And she obviously didn't have too much resistance. She was open to it. But someone who got attached to her identity as a wrist sufferer joined, and the problem is the people join all kinds of clubs and societies and I'll start a support group for wrist sufferers. And of course it's seemingly well-meaning, but it's not, because you just entrench that. The cancer support group, or the support group for widows of people killed in combat, or whatever. People have all this kind of stuff going on, and of course it becomes part of their identity. Okay, every week I go to the support group, and now it becomes fixed in their identity, and that's really hard to dislodge them. So yeah, it's just what I love about this teaching is it just doesn't spare anything. You just look at all of the ego's games, and you can see through it all and just go, no, not that. No, that's not the truth either. No, not the truth either. Only the truth is true and nothing else is true. And you realize that these are all forms of death, attack, and murder. He says here, what need is a mind, such a mind, an enlightened mind, for thoughts of death, attack, and murder? What can it perceive surrounding except safety, love, and joy? What is there it could choose to be condemned, and what is there it could judge against? Because there's nothing else but love, and it sees that. So the world it perceives arises from a mind at peace within itself. Okay, so if your mind isn't split, then you can perceive the world peacefully. If your mind is still split, then that split will cause you to perceive the world dualistically, and you'll see threat and danger lurking everywhere. So no danger lurks in anything it perceives, for it is kind, and only kindness does it look upon. Pretty radical stuff, really. I mean, what he's pointing to here. It's like to actually live this in a world of separation and duality, where there seems to be so much to worry about, so many threats. To actually live this way in a fearless state is completely radically transformative, isn't it? And you will be an outstanding person if you do that, because most people live in fear. So if you've really transcended in your mind, you will be one of the way showers to show people out of their fear back to love, as Yeshua was. Okay, so any thoughts on number 3?
It's that classic thing that when you're angry and you go somewhere and all you find is angry people, and in the car, people cut you up in the car, and somebody would say, oh, everyone's angry today. Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's you.
You're angry today.
You're the central actor.
Yeah, what's the common theme? It's you, always. You, the perceiver. But that's a level of honesty that most people don't want to go to. They prefer to see it as outside of them rather than inside. Because internally, if you recognize that it's me, then you must change. You have to do. You can't just go, okay, I accept the status quo. You must change your mind, and that requires the undoing of the ego. So then the ego's self-concept is then fundamentally threatened as soon as you understand that, yes, it's a projection of you, and your thoughts are creating your reality moment by moment. But you can change that. Well, then the ego is massively threatened. So that's why, when you think such a simple realization, why can't everyone just accept, yeah, okay, my thoughts create my reality. I'm creating it. That's not a common belief at all, is it, in society? Not at all. Very few people believe that. And even people who say they believe it don't really believe it, because they still blame the external world. To really accept that means a radical responsibility for your life, and realizing that in every moment, you're responsible for whatever's being experienced. But that's the liberation. That's the key to liberation, because then you can choose to let it go. If you accept the responsibility, then you can choose to let it go. If you deny responsibility, then you must be a victim of it, and you can't let it go. So that keeps you in the victimhood. We discussed this yesterday. That is the single point of transformation. If someone gets the idea that I'm responsible and I can actually do something about it, then they can start to change. And if they deny that responsibility and they keep blaming everyone and everything else, then there's no transformation possible. Okay. So happy with number 3?
Yeah.
Number 4?
What's coming up for me is sometimes it's the resistance to being willing to change. It's not so much the refusal to change, but there's another step there where they're resistant to being willing. There's many stages, isn't there, to change? Wanting to change, willing to change, able to change, they can change. Yeah, it's interesting.
Starts with a little willingness. Yeshua says, just give a little willingness to this. Because if you're a little bit willing, then the Holy Spirit can work with that. Like, okay, well, let's take you one step into the willingness and then show you that it works. Show you a little miracle, and then you're okay. Well, then you're ready to take the next step, and then the ball's rolling, and you're on your hero's journey. But it can't work with any person if they're just not willing. And it's like, no, computer says no, not going there. Well, then what they need is more pain. That's what they need. Okay, well, then you suffer, and you suffer some more, and your pain will get worse until you're willing. So that's always what you can think. If someone's really not willing, you go, okay, well, it's fine. In time they will be. Just need to suffer more. And until they've suffered more, I can't help them. So again, some people would say that's a bit callous. It's like, well, but that's the truth. You can't help them if they're not willing.
No, if you try and help somebody that's not willing, they just become more resistant. So you're doing the opposite, aren't you?
Yeah, you can't force it on them. So you could say, well, look, when you're willing, come to me, my door's always open. And then you wait. And maybe a few years later they come back and go, wow, okay. I'm ready, because before it was just like, I thought I still had it handled. You see, the ego's, no, you still got it handled. You still kind of know what's going on here and who you are, and you can kind of control reality. And it's only when they suffer enough that they realize that actually they can't. And then the transformation can happen. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can have a much more curious. I was always curious. I was like, okay, well, maybe. I don't have to suffer necessarily greatly. I mean, there's always an element of suffering. That's what's behind the journey, isn't it? I know I'm not really that happy. So there's an element of suffering, but it doesn't have to be acute suffering. It just be like, I know something's not quite right. And then that can be enough to then take you on your journey. If you're curious and you're open. If you're stubborn and you're resistant, then you need more pain. That way of transformation is the hard way. That's the way of the cross. Whereas we're following the way of mastery, which is saying, well, just with a subtle prompt, just with the slightest prompt, you can learn. You don't need to be slapped in the face or hit over the head with a baseball bat. Just a little twinge can be enough to go, oh, okay, yeah, okay, all right, I get it. So we refining, what you're doing here, this process is refining your perception, aren't you? So it's like, okay, just the subtleties, a nuance of an emotion is enough for you to change your mind. You don't need massive suffering. It's just really tuning into the subtleties. And this is skillful. The Buddhists call it skillful practice, skillful living. Okay. So just the subtleties I can tune into, and I can change based on a subtle energy that most people wouldn't even know about, because you've got so subtle in your perception that you can see it, you can perceive it and say, okay, no, that I can see, and that's a subtle pattern of the ego, but I choose to let it go now. And that's kind of what we're doing with this work, isn't it? It's like detectives. Okay, let's look at the subtlety of it, and then once we become aware of a pattern, you can let it go. And that's kind of what I see happening with you a lot. It's like you're detecting these patterns. Oh, okay, I see it. And then there's like a little realization and then you can let it go. And that's the way you just clean your mind systematically of all these programs. So eventually, well, there's nothing left, just pure formless awareness.
The other thing that was just popping up for me was we might look at all the beliefs that stop us experiencing pure formless awareness, but sometimes we've got negatives in our mind about how it will be when we are at peace, when we are in love. We have these belief systems, it will be boring, or it'll be too quiet, or I won't have anything to work on, or so I was just exploring that with myself, like, what stops me experiencing what I believe I want to experience. And there was a few little like, oh, it would be too quiet, it would be too boring.
Yeah, I mean, that goes, now you're getting down to the original desire. If you look at this, no, wait, see if I can find it there, course pack. What was the original sponsoring desire behind it all? Well, it's too boring. Maybe we should.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that's what it was, wasn't it?
Maybe we should try something else. You know, just an innocent wondering, which became then a thought that we believed in, and then we got attached to it, and then we created an entire illusion to justify it. But all it was like, well, what if? What if there's something else? Well, that's interesting. So we kind of got, we convinced ourselves we were bored with eternity and pure formless awareness of perfect love and just being perfectly at peace and in bliss all the time. And this little thought convinced us that actually maybe there's something else that's more interesting.
Well, this is exactly it. Well, this is what I was thinking, kind of subconsciously, not really consciously, but about, well, we must have split off for a reason, and you know that reason must still be there somewhere, and this is what I've just found then, isn't it? It would be boring, be quiet. Yeah,
be too quiet, too boring. Well, you know, to take your choice. It's eternal bliss, everlasting peace and stillness, or this, you know, what can you call it? This madhouse. Those are the choices. So
yeah, right. I'll let go of boring.
Being in bliss eternally. Imagine that state. You've been in that mystic state of real.
Yeah, it's not boring. It's not boring at all.
Just
not quiet either. It's quite.
You're just, you know, it's an ecstatic state. You're like, it doesn't really get higher than this. Like, why would you not want to be in that? Because everything else is a come down. Some Gary Renard tells a story of a guy, a Buddhist monk, who was asked about sex, and you know, he was celibate, and then he just said to the person, well, when you're coming all the time, it really doesn't matter. When you're in that ecstatic state all the time, you know, you don't need the sudden temporary, you know, thrill of the orgasm, because it's like you're always there. So you don't need any of the desires and of course the mirror of those is the fears anymore. You just rooted in this, and you go, well, that's that. I'm just in bliss always, and that, you know, that never changes. Why would I want to change bliss? There's no higher state than that. Everything else is a come down from that. So actually it's a less than. I'm sacrificing something if I go and experience this. And when you start to understand what this entails, which is what Yeshua was training us very well to do through this course, you go, why would I want any of that? That's just disastrous. That's ruinous to my peace of mind. You know, I choose eternal peace, unchanging peace over this any day and twice on Sundays, because this just doesn't cut it. I don't want this anymore. But he has to make us aware of just how dysfunctional the ego is to make that choice. Because if you think there's still some hope in it, then you'll still carry on in it, won't you? The part of your mind will go, no, something else will work. I've tried everything, but this thing will work, whatever that may be. And that's why it's very, you know, some would say harsh. He's just saying nothing else will work. Do you not get it? Nothing in the ego, nothing the ego has sponsored is ever going to work. So to just let it go entirely. Be willing to go entirely into the spirit. That's your only salvation. That's the only way out.
I feel a bit emotional that that boring thing has come up, because I guess I kind of knew it was there. Yeah. It's like, oh, well, no, that's just another block. Yeah, another one gone.
Well, you're hitting then what you're going to. See how you go up the ladder? You're getting to the very essence of that original thought of separation. Something in us said, this is too boring. We don't want eternal peace. We want some action. We want something else, another experience And that was the original seed of the desire that then produced all of this chaos. So you're getting to the very core thought and going, okay, but let's look at that again.
That's the original craving, isn't it? And desire for something.
Yeah, the original desire for some other experience than pure formless awareness. And that, the seed of that desire, within that desire lies all the evil of the world.
Yeah.
It all came from there. All the guilt and the sin and the fear and the attack thoughts and everything that's manifested lies in that desire. So this is the root of all evil. That little thought that you just picked up, that's the root of all evil. That's what causes you to fall down the ladder, out of God, out of heaven, into the sickness and the sin and the death of this world. That little going, oh, I think it's boring. Whoa, okay, maybe I better just mind that thought. And let it go. Okay, no, actually pure formless awareness is not boring. It's what I truly want. It's everything. It's my being, it's my life. And I absolutely don't want this, because this is insanity. I don't want a hopeless, desperate dream where I'm going to suffer and die over and over and over again. I don't want that anymore. Why would I consciously choose that? Well, I think that's more exciting than pure formless awareness with perfect love. That's going to give
ego
me more.
Yes, ego saying it's boring. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, classic defense. Oh no, that's boring.
Get it? Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you think that suffering and pain and sickness and death is exciting, then be my guest. Carry on in the ego. But if you're honest with yourself, you go, that's not exciting. That's just horrible, awful suffering, pain, needlessly, for no reason at all. It's not exciting. And the little snippets of excitement it gives you in the desire phase are just a covering over all of that deep suffering and pain and unconsciousness.
So I've been running away from being bored all my life, and I can see that now. And I remember when I was really young, sitting, in bliss, daydreaming, and my mum yelling at me and telling me, go and do something. And I can so see clearly now that I've been avoiding boredom, keeping busy, doing things, creating busyness. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've controlled it well, I've made a good life out of it. But this is like another step to it. This is like, oh, so at the bottom of it, I was scared of being bored.
Yeah, and you were actually scared of bliss. You were scared of just surrendering into that perfect oneness where everything was fine. There was nothing you needed to do. And that fear then manifested through that experience. So your mum said that to you, but she was just your projection, and then that became entrenched. Okay, no, all right. So I have to keep myself busy doing, otherwise I'm not worthy. I'm not going to get special love that I crave. You see. So you see how these patterns work together. It's like, okay, so special love, and then your mum says that, and then that creates a belief in your mind, and then your entire life is kept busy. You because of that program, you kept yourself very busy doing stuff, being scared of just being, because, well, then your mind's telling you, if I just be, I'm going to be bored and I'm not going to have any worth. Isn't that? Oh, well, you're kind of useless. What are you doing? You need to be doing something to justify your existence in this world. That's the ego's program.
Yeah. When people say, what have you been doing? And if you say nothing, it's like, well, you're worthless then, aren't you?
Yeah, because our society is based on you're a human doing, and what you're doing is important, not what you're being. But that's totally upside down thinking. And yet our whole society is based on this upside down thinking. It's why you can't buy into any of it. Just don't believe any of it, because the whole thing is a story designed to enslave you into this thought system that is really horrible. You look at where it leads. I mean, look at what the ego does to people, and you just go, that's just why would you want any of that? crazy madness when you become conscious of it, but they're not conscious of it. They think that that's just how it is. And there's no choice in the matter. And this is a teaching saying, no, you absolutely have a choice. In every moment you have a choice, because you can choose how you perceive everything. And that's the critical choice that you always have. And it's quite a responsibility to take. So in every moment, I have to make a conscious choice. Most people don't want the responsibility, so they rather let the ego just run the show, and then they think they're the victim because they don't have a choice. But you absolutely do have a choice. And the heroes of this world are people who take up that responsibility. Yes, okay, I have a choice, and I'll exercise that power of choice responsibly, for good. To free myself and free others.
Yeah, it's funny because I saw a friend. I didn't see her. I thought of a friend, and I could see in her that she was always running away. And of course, I've been running away. We all have. We've been running away from bliss, love.
Yeah, it's insane. This whole illusion is you're running away from your source. You're running away from who you really are into this false reality where you suffer and you die. And we keep doing that over and over and over again. Every lifetime is another, okay, well, I'll have another trip. I'll try and run away some more. That was the source of the projection. The ego is trying to run away from the imagined punishment of the source. But all of that was projected illusion. The source doesn't want to punish you. It just is what it is. But the ego has convinced itself that now, it deserves to be punished for its imagined crimes, and now it's got to run away from something. It's going to run away and hide in an illusion of a physical universe where apparently this source can't enter, and so that's why we don't see God in the world. It's not because it's not physical, and that's all by design. Why you have to go within the mind to find it. So you start to see, this diagram we keep referring to, but again, it just reveals more and more of the truth, doesn't it? You look at it and you look at it and you go, okay. So now today you hit that original thought of separation. Oh, I'm bored. Maybe there's something more interesting. That thought, that was the original thought that took us away from pure formless awareness, and then kicked off this whole process, took us down the ladder to then being the victims of the world in this very helpless, disempowered state, going, oh, I'm suffering and I'm dying, and why is this happening to me? Just that thought, the root of all evil. And you just identified it, which is brilliant. Okay, well, you don't have to believe it anymore.
Funny.
Yeah. And so simple. Just like, oh, there we go. That's enlightenment. Just identify the thought, let it go now, and know that only this is true, and this is all you want. So your desire must be changed from the desire for separation to the desire for truth. That's the miracle. Remember the levels of mind diagram. That is the miracle, isn't it? That your desire fundamentally changes.
Yeah.
Bring that up quickly.
And that just shows you can just change your mind, because I didn't need to do any letting go. So I noticed the boredom and like, oh, how ridiculous. Let that go.
Well, you did let it go. But it was
That's
a direct,
it's instant.
I notice it, and that's ridiculous, and I can let it go.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as that. So the desire, what do you desire? Do you desire to maintain the separation because you think that boredom, that this world is somehow more desirable than being bored in pure formless awareness? That's one desire you can have. Well, the other desire is, no, I want only that pure formless awareness. And I'm willing to let go of all my misperceptions about it. So no, only that is going to make me happy. Only that is going to fulfill me. And in every situation where you're called upon to make a decision, that's what you're choosing. What do you desire? And that's going to then create the belief and the thought and the emotion and the perception, rippling all the way up. So it's actually really, I mean, when you understand this thought system, it's really simple, isn't it? But this understanding is very uncommon. Most psychology professors, experts, they won't understand this. It's beyond them. So to study A Course in Miracles gives you this, really profound knowledge that that you can then use to free yourself. That's the only point of it. It's not to become something more special than anyone else, just so you can free yourself and maybe free others as well. Okay, should we go back to number 5?
Bless you.
Thank you. Bless you too.
The remembrance of perfect love has no need of time when it's served its purpose. Now it waits just one moment more for pure formless awareness of perfect love to take its final step. Time has disappeared, taking perception with it as it goes, and leaving the truth to be itself. That instant is our goal, for it contains the memory of perfect love. And as we look upon a world released, it is this presence that calls to us and comes to take us home, reminding us of our identity, which our letting go has restored to us. So what that brings up is I've been working on the last few days about trusting I'm home now. And it kind of had human connotations about home and childhood home and stuff. But it's interesting that ties in with this aha today about I'm able to come home. It's not boring. It's interesting. Kind of makes sense to me.
I mean, the story, parable of the prodigal son, was what Yeshua told to try and teach people this. So the story. The prodigal son, he's bored. He's like restless. He's like, I want to take my inheritance now, and I want to leave home, and I'm going to explore in the world. And that's what we did. And then he goes out into the world, and he has various experiences, and he squanders the money, and then he ends up suffering and got no money, and comes to his senses and realizes, look, I would have been much better off at home because I was taken care of, I was loved. And so I'll go back now with the sense of guilt, going, well, I've sinned. Comes back to the father, and the father says, welcome. Yeah, I'm just very glad to have you home. There was no guilt. No condemnation for the son's apparent errant ways and his sin, which is a great story to illustrate exactly what we just described. Son got bored, decided, hey, I'm going to do it myself. I want to go out on an adventure, and took his inheritance. And the father said, okay, well, if that's what you want, because that's how it works. No one's going to force you. So take your mind and go and squander your psychic energy in the world, dissipate it all, and suffer as a result. And when you've suffered enough, then you come to your senses and you realize, well, actually, that was a pretty good state. I prefer that. I'd rather be at home and safe and loved and protected and comfortable than living like this with the pigs, eating whatever muck he was eating, and so then decides to journey back, having had the experience. And that's it's a great parable, because it's what we've all done. We've all departed from our home in pure formless awareness, perfect love, to go out of that into the world which we've made up, and then we suffer, and we feel like disconnected from our source, and we feel alone and bereft and all of those things. And then when that experience gets too painful, then we say, okay, maybe it's time to return. And then the journey, the hero's journey is the journey home from the known world, which is actually the illusion, the lost world. You've got lost in the dream, and then it's making your way back to home and getting over all the obstacles that you set up in your own mind today.
quite ironic because my eldest son, that you just like told his story, where he said it was very boring living in Colchester where I live. And so he went off for an adventure, and he spent the last 10 or 11 years in Asia and traveling around. And now he's decided to come home. And in a few weeks' time, he's coming home to live here for a while. And it probably doesn't look quite so boring anymore. You know, it's like a safe home to come to. So he's living out my reflection. Well,
yeah.
reflection.
But he had to have the experience to know that. Because it's like, well, I thought the grass was green on the other side, that I'd find whatever I was looking for in Asia or wherever, and he hasn't found it. You're not going to find it outside of you. You have experiences, but you know, often they don't live up to the expectation that you had. I was reading a story about an explorer called Rene someone or other, who had this dream of going to Africa, and he was going to find Timbuktu. This was his, you know, when he goes there, and it's absolutely horrendous. You know, you're going through the Sahara Desert. I mean, it's like, you know, not enough food, not enough water. He nearly dies of hunger and thirst, and eventually gets there. And you know, because apparently the legend is that the streets are paved with gold. Of course, they weren't. And having done all of this, makes his way back home, like in this emaciated, you know, starved, dehydrated state. He gets a medal from the, you know, the French government because you know, he's done this amazing thing, and he's like, okay, I'm done. No more. I'd rather just stay at home and, you know, and just settle down and have a family than to go on the adventure. But he had to do it in order to know that. So that's what we've all had to do. Come into time and space, learn from our mistakes, learn that it's not all, you know, the ego cuts it out to be, and then say, okay, it's time to make the journey home. And that's what everyone is here doing. So at some point in that journey, some are still convinced the ego is going to work, and others are starting to wake up to the fact that it's never going to work. And well, what a relief that is. Okay, it's never going to work. I can just let the whole thing go then, and accept the truth as its replacement.
Yeah, I've got to go now. I've got somebody coming.
Okay.
And that's a good time to stop. But thank you so much for my aha moment again. So many aha moments, but
so many ahas. Well,
yeah.
Well done for showing up, because you have to go through the experience and do the session to get there, don't you? Or it doesn't happen. And one doesn't know what's aha you're going to get when. You just
no.
You just journey it. You never know what's going to happen. So just keep showing up, and you're in the field of transformation, and then the Holy Spirit can work with that.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thank you ever so much.
Okay.
See you soon. Bye.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Okay, so I'm just going to read the lesson. All fear is past, and only love is here. All fear is over, and only love is present, is the translation of that. All fear is past because its source is gone, and all its thoughts gone with it. Love remains the only present state, whose source is here eternally. And the world seemed bright, clear, safe, and welcoming, with all my past mistakes oppressing it, and showing me distorted forms of fear. Yet in the present, love is obvious, and its effects apparent. All the world shines in reflection of its whole awareness. And I perceive a world released at last. So that's our alternative translated version. Holy light's been changed to whole awareness, and forever and forever changed to eternally. So I perceive a world that's freed, released at last. Released from my own fears. my own false desires, expectations. So my source, says the prayer, Father or source, original was, let not your holy world escape my sight today. Translated as, let me see everything in the world through your awareness today. Let me see everything through your awareness. Without fear, there's no fear, no negative thought or emotion in true awareness, pure formless awareness of perfect love. Nor let my ears be deaf to all the hymns of gratitude the world is singing underneath the sounds of fear. Translated as, and let my ears hear all the hymns of gratitude the world is singing underneath the sounds of fear. Nice imagery, just this ongoing song beneath underlies the ego's misperceptions. Song of gratitude and praise for the world, for the real world. So there is a real world present holds safe from all past mistakes. And I choose to perceive only this world today. I'll just reflect on that for a few moments. Perception is a choice, not a fact. You choose to perceive in a certain way. Choose to perceive only this world today. So choose to perceive only love, and you will. That's the simple message, and fear must then disappear, and only love be present. So practice the lesson. Just listen to any of the meditation. I've sent you a 15-minute meditation to do, and a 3-minute breath break to top you up frequently this afternoon and evening. Just reconnect with this presence of love that underlies more fear. To choose that rather than the illusion of fear. So that's the lesson done. Just going to talk now about, just read the text reading from the Manual for Teachers today. So this is on how is judgment relinquished? Section 10 of the Manual for Teachers, in answer to the question, how is judgment relinquished? So I'm going to read this, do the translation as I go. There's not a lot to translate because just a few terms like God. Mostly it's about the mind's judgments. So let's hear what Yeshua has to say in answer to the question, how is judgment relinquished? Judgment, he says, like other devices by which the world of illusions is maintained, is totally misunderstood by the world. It is actually confused with wisdom and substitutes for truth. As the world uses the term, an individual is capable of, quote, good and, quote, bad judgment. And his education aims at strengthening the former, the good judgments, and minimizing the latter, bad judgments. There is, however, considerable confusion about what these categories mean. What is, quote, good judgment to one is bad judgment to another. Further, even the same person classifies the same action as showing good judgment at one time and bad judgment at another. and the good and bad are in quotes. So, in other words, none of that's really true. We're talking about the domain of perception. That's not true, and therefore it's not consistent. So Yeshua says, nor can any consistent criteria for determining what these categories are be really taught. At any time, the student may disagree with what his would-be teacher says about them. And the teacher himself may well be inconsistent in what he believes. Quote, good judgment in these terms does not mean anything. No more does, quote, bad judgment. So he's getting us to look at this really dualistic thought system of good and bad judgments based on false belief that all of it's real. And to realize that none of that really applies, that the whole domain of good and bad judgment is really just choosing between illusions. The only thing you need to do is to let go of judging at all. You cannot judge between illusions, you can only judge between the truth and the illusion. So let's continue. Paragraph 2. It is necessary for the teacher of God or the teacher of love, perfect love, it's the translation of God, teacher of love, to realize not that he or she should not judge, but that he cannot. I'll use the male rather than he or she in the reading. So in giving up judgment, he is merely giving up what he did not have. He gives up an illusion, or better, he has an illusion of giving up. The way Yeshua plays with the words. You give up an illusion, but actually what you're doing is you have an illusion of giving up something. In truth, nothing was really there. It's nothing other than truth. But because you've got a false belief in your mind, you now have an illusion of giving up. So it says in another part of the course, forgiveness is an illusion, but it's the only illusion which will lead you out of the dream to the truth. And so he has actually merely become more honest. Teacher of God, become more honest, recognizing that judgment was always impossible. For him, he no longer attempts it. This is no sacrifice. On the contrary, he puts himself in a position where judgment through him, rather than by him, can occur. And this judgment is neither, quote, good nor bad. It is the only judgment there is, and it is only one. God's Son is guiltless, and sin does not exist. Love's extension, perfect love's extension, is the translation of God's Son. Sin does not exist. There is no negative. Nothing we've ever done wrong. And the aim of our curriculum, continues Yeshua, unlike the goal of the world's learning, is the recognition that judgment in the usual sense is impossible. This is not an opinion, but a fact. In order to judge anything rightly, one would have to be fully aware of an inconceivably wide range of things, past, present, and to come. One would have to recognize in advance all the effects of his judgments on everyone and everything involved in them in any way. And one would have to be certain there's no distortion in his perception. So his judgment would be wholly fair to everyone on whom it rests now and in the future. Who is in a position to do this? Who, except in grandiose fantasies, would claim this for himself? So it's just saying we can't really judge because we have no idea of all the effects. We have no idea of what someone is said, or done in their whole life. We have no idea of the future effects and what impact that's going to have on everyone and everything, every sentient being. So how can we possibly judge? So just reflect on that. You can't actually judge. It's not possible. So give it up. Just remember how many times you thought you knew all the, quote, facts you needed for judgment and how wrong you were. Is there anyone who has not had this experience? Would you know how many times you merely thought you were right without ever realizing you were wrong? Why would you choose such an arbitrary basis for decision making? Wisdom is not judgment, it is the relinquishment of judgment. Make then but one more judgment. Make only one more judgment, he's saying, and that is this. There is someone with you, in capital S, someone being the Holy Spirit or remembrance of love, whose judgment is perfect. He or it does know all the facts, past, present, and to come. Does know all the effects of its judgment on everyone. Does know the effects of all of its judgment on everyone and everything involved in any way. And it is wholly fair to everyone, for there is no distortion in its perception. It's wholly fair, wholly just. So therefore lay all judgment down, not with regret, but with a sigh of gratitude. So feel the gratitude, breathe it in. And therefore lay judgment, all judgment down, not with regret, but with a sigh of gratitude. Now are you free of a burden so great that you could merely stagger and fall down beneath it. And it was all illusion, nothing more. Now can the teacher of God or love rise up unburdened and walk lightly on. And it is not only this that is his benefit. The sense of care is gone, for he has none. He has given it away along with judgment. He gave himself to him whose judgment, to it whose judgment he has chosen now to trust. Instead of his own, and now he makes no mistakes. Now he makes no mistakes. His guide is sure. Where he came to judge, he comes to bless. Where now he laughs, he used to come to weep. And that is the benefit of laying down all judgments, letting them all go. Judgment, it's just talking about in the negative sense, any negative thought and emotion, anything that condemns anyone or anything, makes it real in your perception. So it's not difficult to relinquish judgment, but it is difficult indeed to try to keep it. Teacher of God or love lays it down happily the instant, the moment he recognizes its cost. All of the ugliness he sees about him as its outcome. You just look at the world, every scrap of ugliness and pain and suffering and sickness and death, the outcome of this process of judgment. All the pain he looks upon as its result, all the loneliness and sense of loss, of passing time and growing hopelessness, of sickening despair and fear of death, all these have come of it. And now he knows that these things need not be. Not one is true. Not one is true, for he has given up their cause, and they which never were but the effects of his mistaken choice have fallen from him. Teacher of love, this step will bring you peace. Can it be difficult to want only this? Just to let go of all judgment, surrender to peace completely. Why is that so hard? So just a moment, just sit quietly and connect with this non-judgmental presence. Nowhere else to go, nothing else to do, nothing else to think about. Just breathe it in, connect with it. Set the intention to stay there for the rest of the day. In this loving awareness, non-judgmental presence. And so that's what I wish for you. Just stay rooted in this loving presence that transcends all judgments of the ego, all fear and desire and pain. Stay rooted in truth by simply letting go of all of your judgments. And you'll be amazed at what reveals itself to you. So thank you for listening, and that brings us to the end of today's session. So thank you to Sally and Sue for joining earlier, and namaste, which means the non-judgmental self in me acknowledges and honors that same non-judgmental presence in you.